Alright, that's enough Warframe 1999 and Final Fantasy XI private servers for me. I should probably get back to this video, and get back to editing. Haha, it's been a hot minute, but I took Christmas off. Anyway, let's check it out. Oh no! Shadow Generations came out of nowhere and reminded us that playing as anybody other than Sonic in a full-fledged solo game is something that's not only a good idea, but also that helps flesh out the massive cast of characters with interesting powers. What it personally reminded me of as well was the fact that there's a main character that hasn't even been properly playable for almost 20 years now, unless you count the spin-offs. But ultimately, this particular little fella has been pushed to the wayside since 2006. That's right, I am talking, of course, about the one, the only, Pello the Dog, the greatest side character ever introduced to the Sonic franchise. I'm just joking, it's Silver, you dingus. I went back into my patented think tank to think of a fun way to reintroduce Silver to the franchise proper, because 18 years since his last and basically only real playable appearance is absolutely insane. And I think giving him the Shadow Generations treatment would be a great way to do this. Sure, you could just make a Silver the Hedgehog game and call it a day, but where's the fun in that? You know what game desperately needs a port unlike Sonic Generations? You know what game has a setting and story hook that will be a great reintroduction and origin point for Silver in the Sonic franchise? Sonic Unleashed. Not only does that game need a port to modern consoles and PC, but it could also use just a bit of a quality of life fix-up. You know, area-specific fight themes, turning up Sonic's controls to be more like Generations. Plus, with modern hardware, areas like Adabat won't drop frames anymore. But I wish to focus on tacking on a gimmick. And by gimmick, I mean a whole-ass extra game. Because Silver post-06 and his entire reason for wanting to come back, how he met Eggman Nega, why Eggman Nega is even a thing, why Eggman Nega chose that god-awful name, is completely unexplored. Like, we often hear about how the future keeps changing, but like, we never actively see it, except for like a single good future panel in the comics, which Silver comes back from anyway a few issues later. So why not change that? Why not give Silver a brand new origin point that isn't forgotten, or a forgotten PSP game? Using the backdrop of Sonic's World Adventure, we can absolutely tag on a brand new Silver solo adventure while also exploring the future of Sonic's world. However, instead of just calling it Silver Unleashed, I think that would imply there be a Silver the Werehog section, and I wouldn't do that to anybody. I'm sure there are a bunch of fans out there that would like that. I, on the other hand, don't. I think the Werehog was fine where it is, shouldn't tag on to anybody else. No, this beautiful piece of art would be called Future Unleashed, or Future World Adventure, or Silver World Adventure. Both of which I think work better, but localization, you know, it's a bitch. Taking place after Sonic Unleashed, obviously, set 200 years or so after the current day of the Sonic story. The story sees Silver as a brand new adventurer. The Earth isn't blown up or anything, but the impact of years of Dr. Eggman's bullshit in general, we could have done better impacts, have left the Earth a bit scarred. But, relatively, the future's a half-decent place to live. Think of a cyberpunk aesthetic, but more Sonic-y, you know? Islanders have moved on to the mainland because, with the rising sea levels, they were forced to move away from their islands and live among the humans. The tales of Sonic and his friends and their deeds in their time have passed on into legend, being told through stories of how a group of islanders worked together and saved the world while dealing with the evil plots of the scary Dr. Eggman. However, like in real life, with those who were there for those events having died and faded from memory, people see them more as urban legends, not actual events. Despite Eggman's influence on the world, people have just written that off over the years. Like, yeah, there's a giant chemical plant leaking chemicals outside of West Side Island, but you can also kind of blame that on Gun or any other organization that's still around. Silver would originate from his time Soliana, or to be specific, Soliana's new city. Like, I like to imagine that the, like, you know, the giant, like, metropolis that they were building up in Soleanna has expanded, and surrounding, like, the historic Soleanna, like, you'll have, like, old Soleanna that leads into the castle, but then surrounding it is basically this giant urban city. You know, Crisis City, but not blown up. Silver is fed up with city life and wishes for a life of adventure and excitement. Gifted with extraordinary abilities, he feels like he could do so much more. One typical day, however, the world is shaken by a massive earthquake as the earth once more splits open and Dark Gaia rises from the core of the earth. Silver attempts to help fight off the Dark Gaia monsters flooding into Soleanna, but is quickly overwhelmed. He is saved in time by Chip, who helps Silver escape the monsters. Chip introduces himself as Light Gaia to Silver and explains what just happened. Silver, upset that his home just got overrun by those monsters, is immediately ready to jump back into the fray, but is stopped by Chip. He tells them they're gonna need the Chaos Emeralds to have a better chance at beating the fully awakened Dark Gaia. Silver laments that the Chaos Emeralds are just fictional gems made up for bedtime stories. Chip retorts that they aren't, and that the 7 emeralds had to be used by him and Sonic centuries prior to defeat Dark Gaia when they were awoken prematurely. Silver then explains that all of that is stuff of legends and nobody knows what's true or not. One story claims that this Sonic managed to stop a giant water lizard, while other stories claim Eggman or whatever captured flickies and animals for robots. Chip laughs and explains all that is true and he just has to take his word for it to help save the world. Silver takes the opportunity to finally do something with his gifts. Despite his hesitance on whether or not all these stories are real, the two leave Soleanna and set off towards finding the Chaos Emeralds, before Dark Gaia has a chance to drown the world in darkness. So coming up with fanfiction for an intro to a Whoopi Unleashed sequel is all well and dandy. What about the gameplay? Silver has never been much of a speed-type character, so instead of just making a reskin of Sonic and Shadow with green visual effects, I feel like it'd be much more interesting to make Silver a bit slower with combat focus, based around his psychokinesis. Future Unleashed is split into 2 sections, action stages and hub stages. Action stages are your traditional fare, however, unlike Sonic and Shadow, Silver instead would take more of a Werehog approach to stages. Unlike the Werehog, however, the action stages are still somewhat fast. They aren't 20-minute slogfests. Silver's action stages feature a bit more focus on platforming, using a bit more of an open space design. Nothing too open, but using your psychokinesis to fly between floating platforms and create your own pathways in specific set pieces like in 06, using your powers to grab ledges. The stages would absolutely have some high-speed action moments, but these will be more akin to spectacle set pieces. Like imagine in Sonic Forces when you're in space for the Death Egg with Sonic and you're riding on all those ships, you know, shit like that. Silver's combat would obviously focus on his psychokinesis, replacing the Werehog's stretchy limbs with green energy waves that can push and pull enemies away. Sonic's combat in Frontiers is a fine basis for Silver in this game. The only thing I would change is I would focus more on push and pull gimmicks, giving you a psychokinesis bar that allows you to throw projectiles back at enemies. I would also introduce a berserk mode for Silver called Psycho Frenzy, allowing you to do more damage based around your combo number like in Sonic Frontiers. Action stages would be split into Day Acts and Night Acts. Day Acts have less combat with more of a focus on going from point A to point B with platforming, focusing on making your way through the stage. Night Acts would focus more on combat. While not as heavy stop-and-go gameplay as in Unleashed, these would be more bite-sized. Day Acts would last around the usual 4 to 5 minutes, where Night Acts would last 7 to 8 minutes when you initially start the game, much like in 06 where Silver stages were a bit longer than Sonic and Shadow's. But once you start unlocking more powers, combat will start shaving off seconds. Silver's combat kit would increase to feature more grab abilities, allowing you to do damage to more enemies at once, holding them in place, all that kind of fun stuff, you know? Aside from just being able to punch and kick with fancy-dancy green energy waves, you'll also be able to lift up nearby objects, you know, newspaper stands, benches, potted plants, all that fun stuff. And as you start progressing through the story, Silver gains the ability to do more flashy stuff as he grows more confident in his abilities, eventually being able to rip the ground up and throwing it towards enemies or grabbing smaller enemies to use as projectiles. Eventually also able to create makeshift fists and weaponry using the environment around you. Think giant fists made of rubble or maybe even a crossbow, like for the fuck of it, you know? Like have fun with it. Silver would also have finishers, but Unlike Unleashed, where it's a quick-time event, you instead get finishers based around your combo numbers, like in other modern action games. Think the Arkham series and Insomniac Spider-Man. Silver's finishers will be based on enemy type. Big enemies might try and slam Silver down, but he holds them back, or small enemies might try and surround him. Eventually, you'd also be able to use finishers on multiple enemies after an upgrade. Defensive-wise, Silver is pretty straightforward, having a dodge and parry button like Sonic, but for fun, Silver can also use the Psychokinesis to use the environment around him to create a shield. Naturally, Silver would still have rings instead of a health bar because I don't like that on Sonic characters, so enemy attacks do set amount of ring damage. Heavy attacks do more damage, lighter attacks do less damage. Your shields can protect you from multiple light attacks or one heavy attack. For the sake of fairness, step your cooldown on it. Eventually, you'd also be able to use your Psychokinesis to re-grab lost rings in a pinch during combat. Hub stages, however, will be packaged deals that have a heavier focus on platforming challenges. Basically, like the White Void in Shadow Generations, or a smaller version of the Allies and Frontiers. Unlike Shadow Generations, however, there's multiple of these. Based on the location you're at in the world, Silver's power progression will be what allows you to progress in these hub worlds. Like in Sonic Unleashed, you'll be collecting Gaia keys to progress further in the story, getting day keys in day stages and night keys in night stages, which would allow access to that area's big boss fight. To emulate the way that Sonic Unleashed had you traveling the world between stages and not completing a section immediately upon getting there, your progression is locked behind your character progression. The night gate being locked off by water you can't fly over, the day gate being too high and locked off by like Dark Gaia plants? Goop? I don't know. You'll unlock new abilities during the story, and via those you can go back to previous locations and do the new acts and progress the story. You'll also be fixing up the hub areas. They'll be corrupted because of Dark Gaia and all purple and goopy and broken, but the more stages and challenges in the hubs you finish, the more the area gets cleaned up. So what areas would come up? Exploring the future of Sonic's world is a great excuse to give some areas a new look instead of just repeating areas. The locations you would visit are these. The game would start you off in Spagonia, where it's all relatively the same. Some more futuristic tech and flying cars, basically a European version of Metal City from Riders, but a bit more stoneworks and less like metal roads, you know? The story would revolve around Chip and Silver finding the Gaia Temple in the city to figure out a way to find the Chaos Emeralds. They'd be found by Gun, who have started setting up bases at each Gaia Temple due to their written accounts of the events of 200 years prior. They will help Chip and Silver find the emeralds in return for helping them fight off the Gaia monsters. The Day Act would have you running around Spagonia, and eventually making your way through the abandoned areas beneath the current cities, trying to find the entrance to the Gaia Temple. The Night Act, however, would have you help Gun fight off the Dark Gaia monsters in the city and make safe routes for people to evacuate. The boss for this area will be a ghost Gaia monster, having taken over the giant clock tower in the middle of the city. You'd be, fighting, floating up platforms, maybe flying towards him, hit him in the eye, that kind of fun stuff, you know? The second area would take you to a melted down Halaska. While a lot of the ice has melted, the government, and likewise Gun, has made efforts in protecting the wildlife. It's basically become a massive man-made island aiming to protect the species that would have been wiped out. Silver and Chip would be sent to the Gun facility in Halaska, where a few of the emeralds were being held for research on trying to restore the glaciers. However, while there, the Dark Gaia monsters would attack the facility at night, forcing Silver and Chip to fight off the hordes of aquatic Dark Gaia spawn. The Day Act would feature going through the floating ice and man-made platforms to return a horde of animals that escaped their containment due to a Gaia attack. The Night Act would be the aforementioned protecting the facility. The boss for this area will be another Gaia monster, one that had taken over a massive skeleton in one of the remaining icebergs. It would be like a giant fish, with like tendrils and stuff, and you'd be flying over the water as Silver. There's a lot of cool stuff that could be done with that. Area 3 would take you to Japan. That's right, adding a brand new locale to the game instead of just reskinning old areas. It's finally time to hit up Sonic's Japan. We've been to its China and Unleashed, but in the entire history of Sonic's world, we've never been to its Japan outside of less than canon, Olympic Games. Here will be the second set of emeralds, being guarded by a group of shinobi. Silver and Chip get sent to Japan by Gun after saving the Halaska research facility and clearing the area of Gaia monsters. Here they work with the shinobi to undergo a training regimen at day throughout the city, and at night protect the civilians from Gaia monsters, granting the two the emeralds. The boss for this area would be a test against a massive golem in the secret shinobi grounds beneath the city, as a final test to see if they even stand a chance against Dark Gaia. Area number 4 would be Eggman Land, or at least what used to be Eggman Land. After the years passed since Unleashed, the area has been claimed and used by Gun to house civilians and islanders as the water levels rose. The area is now barely recognizable as the death trap that it used to be, renaming the city to Neo Metropolis. Here, the final emerald rests as the power core for the city. Silver and Chip race through the outskirts of the city to reach the power station, working together with a mysterious benefactor who claims to have a long-standing heritage in the city, working together to create a new power source instead of relying on a Chaos Emerald. At night, while the new power system is being connected to the entire city by the mysterious man, Silver and Chip once again hold off the Gaia monsters. The boss for this area will be Eggman Nega. He had been hiding in Eggman Land, upset with his ancestors' failures, and took this opportunity to kickstart his own plans for world domination. It's a giant Eggman mech powered by the Emerald. The final area would be a high-floating Soliana. With all 7 emeralds at the ready, Chip and Silver return to the origin point and find Soliana essentially locked in darkness. They work together to restore the area back to the planet. Unlike the other areas, the day act for this stage would involve actually getting into the city, speeding through the surrounding areas and making their way up to the floating city. The night act would focus heavily on fighting off the remaining Dark Gaia forces in the city and making sure the people can come out of hiding. Meanwhile, Gun and the Shinobi are all at the 7 Gaia temples around the world, Silver and Chip having fought off the final Dark Gaia monster and getting ready to reset the world back into place. As the world starts being clicked back into place, Dark Gaia spews out one last massive spout of darkness that overtakes Silver and Chip, holding back Soliana from being rejoined to the planet. Silver and Chip are swallowed into the spout and dragged into the core of the Earth. The final level of the game would be like Eggman Land in Unleashed, however, it takes place in Dark Gaia's domain. Instead of rushing through the core of the Earth, you're thrust into a world of darkness, where you have to swap between the 2 playstyles of the game and reach Dark Gaia's core. The stage would take the shape of Silver's inner turmoil and despair. It would start off as a vaguely ruined Soliana, but quickly morphs into Crisis City, something that looks familiar to Silver and elicits feelings of despair, but in the flames, he also feels a burning sense of hope. Silver and Chip reconvene at Dark Gaia's core where the final boss happens. The first phase of the boss fight would involve racing around the platforms surrounding Dark Gaia, destroying the whole gas over the area. After this, Dark Gaia unleashes his full power. Chip attempts to call the Gaia temples again, but the pure darkness that surrounds them stops Chip's powers from coming through. As Silver and Chip desperately try to fight back against the oncoming onslaught, it's in Silver's hope and determination to save everybody that a flash of light overtakes them all. And suddenly, Chip's bracelet appears, being worn by a shade of Sonic the Hedgehog, who knocks Dark Gaia back before disappearing with a thumbs up and a smile. Chip's bracelet falls in front of Silver, grabbing it and clinging to hope with all his heart. Chip and Silver merge, granting Silver the powers of Light Gaia, appearing as an angelic version of Silver, and the final boss battle really begins. The final boss battle is your typical fare. Like, Silver would float over the everlasting darkness beneath him and knock back any and all attacks Dark Gaia throws at him. There will be a few cool cinematic moments like, dark tendrils coming onto Silver, but then he, stops them in midair and throws them back at Dark Gaia's eyes. And, of course, a new rendition of Dreams of an Absolution starts playing in the background. Silver uses the powers of Light Gaia to subdue and return Dark Gaia back into the core of the planet. Having exhausted his powers, Chip splits back off from Silver and thanks the young hedgehog for his help. After a nice goodbye, Chip sends Silver back up to the surface as the Earth once more restores to its full, round, beautiful glory. Silver looks on at the sunset and then back at his home. He returns to Soliana as the credits roll. Post-credits, however, deep in a lap beneath the streets of Neo Metropolis, Nega uses the power of one of the emeralds and the research of his ancestor in the time stones to attempt another grab at power. As the computer glows softly in the darkness, it shows designs of a photo camera and Angel Island. Eggman Nega laughs, and the game ends. And there you have it! A proper non-Sonic 06 introduction to Silver as a character and showing where he starts his adventures, leading right back to Sonic Rivals, because we shouldn't just forget games even if they're on consoles the average person or Sonic fan doesn't really care about anymore or were even around for when it was a thing. I think Silver getting his own adventure that shows how he started and his first interactions with his time's Eggman is something that is desperately needed. Silver and the entire side of his timeline continues to be an unexplored treasure trove. And I think Chip filling in the player 2 slot instead of introducing like the descendants of other characters is a great way to give Silver something new. Sure, you could introduce Kiloprower, the mechanic fox who took over his family line's mechanic shop, or introduce the current guardian of the Master Emerald, fucking Bones the Echidna or something, I don't fucking know. But I don't think that's really warranted in a game that's just trying to show a simple first look into the world. It can always be expanded on, but I also think it's a little played out. However, on the flip side, I will say the idea of visiting Sonic's Tokyo and introducing a shinobi clan is something that's a big me thing. Not because I'm a massive weeb or anything, which, I mean, I guess I am. I'm not sure at this point, but, like, it's more Espio in the current canon is the only Japanese character we have. I mean, presumably. His entire ninja stick continues to be unexplored, so I figured, yeah, let's use a world adventure as an excuse to actually show that side of the world. Plus, a school of ninjas protecting the Chaos Emeralds in the time they aren't being used anymore is, like, kinda dope. I mean, at least I think so. Like, I mean, you know, fucking get off my tits.
Anyway, thank you for watching this video. Sorry it took so long. As you could tell by the intro, I had plans for this one. Luckily, I was able to save at least a little bit in the intro, but believe me, I have plans. All the areas were going to be animated. There was going to be like a whole ending thing. It was supposed to be out for Christmas. Didn't work out. Thanks for waiting. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.